Well, hello, everyone. JR back here with you once again. Welcome to Explore. Today, we are going to be exploring agriculture with my friend, Dean Snook. How you doing?
I'm doing good. How about you?
I'm doing excellent. The reason that we came together to do this is we wanted to inform people about different aspects and things that are going on. We already did one on shipping containers. It was a great hit. My brother did an excellent job of that. So I have heard that you're into agriculture just a little bit.
Well, I'll give you a little bit of my background, if I may. Yes, a little bit. I've been a farmer in central Pennsylvania for approximately 45 years. Grew up on a farm my entire lifetime. So, and then aside from a brief 4-year time at Pennsylvania State University, after that I moved back and operated a family farm, crops production, and also sold some agricultural equipment throughout the state of Pennsylvania and into Maryland, New Jersey, and things like that. So I guess that might qualify.
Just a little bit. So you've got your pulse on agriculture and farming, enough to answer these tough, hard-hitting journalistic questions I'm going to bring.
Well, we will find out if that's the case or not, I guess.
Okay, so the first thing I want to kind of ask is, you said you got into it about 40 years, you've been into it. So how has the world of agricultural changed over the years?
Well, I remember the type of equipment that we used to use on the farm when I first was a teenager and things, and how that has evolved over the years. Any industry in this country has undergone major changes, and if they haven't, they've probably disappeared. In order for agriculture to remain viable economically and things, there's had to have been a lot of adaptation, not only technologically, but in the equipment that's used, in consolidation, and things that we could touch bases on. Many fewer people involved in production agriculture now than there were 50 years ago.
And that's one of my questions. Is an aging population a concern in the agricultural business? Because around here, we do have a very strong agricultural business. We have 4-H, FFA. So we're trying to bring kids up, but it seems like farmers are aging out.
Yes, we have those things in our area too. I was a Future Farmer of America in high school, and we have 4-H also. I think a lot of the concern about the aging population in agriculture has to do with the fact that sometimes the second generation has better financial alternatives to take a look at, and that is certainly can be a factor. There's no doubt about it. Farming, though, it's a way of life. It's not just numbers either, and so oftentimes you will have generations that, if the farm consolidates and is able to produce enough income, and sometimes many of the spouses will work off farm just to allow there's an old adage that said, if you want to farm, just start with enough money to just farm till it's all. That's not necessarily true, but it has been challenging to meet some of the financial demands over the years. There's no doubt about it.
Do you see any hope, though, that we're going to be able to get enough young people encouraged in agriculture to continue with it?
Well, here's the thing. We do need to eat. We need food. Somebody's going to need to produce it. So at some point in time, there could become a crisis, but the market will have to adjust to make it worthwhile for people to continue to produce fiber and substance around the world.
Well, does it concern you a little bit about, I believe it's Bill Gates being the largest private farmland owner? Does that seem just a little, I don't know. Is that something we have to worry about?
I can't speak for Mr. Gates. But,
sure, his lawyers want to hear your answer.
But
because when you think farm,
consolidation of power and things like that are possibly never a good thing in the long run.
When I think of farms, I think of I grew up in Hindman for a little portion of time, And one of our good friends there, Tony Stair, his dad had a farm. So the Stair farm forever. Around here, the Benson Havers, the Weises, you think of it being family, not corporate.
Well, let's talk about that a bit, though.
Okay.
We've heard the term factory farm already, right? What is your definition of what do you think of when you hear that term factory farm?
Honestly, I would just think big business.
Okay.
Because factory, I mean, I guess it doesn't have to be big business.
Most of the factory farms that segment of society that likes to kind of like run them down in a sense when they mention that as a negative thing are actually family farms that have just grown. Which
I'm grateful for.
You know, and like I said, hardly any industry, you can't stay the same. Industries that stay the same, either they usually disappear. And most of the has been consolidation over the years from smaller units to less units but larger. That's taken place to a large degree in the agriculture industry also. And it's been a natural progression, partly driven by economics and partly driven by the fact that there's more efficient machinery and ways of producing things that enable farmers to cover more acres than they used to. I used to wonder when I was young, I'd read about farms out in the Midwest and they farm thousands of acres. I said, how could you do that? Because we're farming our little 5-acre patches in the hills of central Pennsylvania. And then I went out to the Midwest one time and I see 1,000 acres flat, drive forever, a couple miles one way in a field. Oh, I see how they can do that. It just depends a little bit where you're at, but the machinery has just changed so much. The efficiency of being able to work more acres than the past has just been a natural progression.
So can you give me just one example of a piece of equipment that you worked with that was just compared to now?
Well, yes. When we first started farming, we had our combine, which is a machine that harvests either corn or soybeans and wheat and things like that. Our combine was a rather antiquated machine that would harvest 4 rows at a time. It was a used machine because that was what we could afford at that point in time. And, maybe if we were lucky, we could harvest 10 acres a day, 10 to 12 acres a day on a good day if nothing broke. Over time, we were afforded the luxury through some hard work, and we sold a line of equipment to other farmers that helped produce income for our farm that enabled us to upgrade our machinery. So we finally bought a new combine, and we could easily more than double the amount of acres that we used to produce. Now, that new combine, the first one we ever bought, this is a lesson on inflation. The first one we ever bought was with the combine, and the corn head and the grain head for it was like $80,000, I think. That was in the late 1970s. Now that same combine, and we're quite a few years removed from that, but that same combine would run over $300,000. So there's been quite a large increase in the outlay. People don't realize the financial outlay for most farms is a huge, huge number, and it's a risk.
Which kind of seems like why you have to almost have a side hustle.
Oftentimes there are side things that, given certain size farms now, sometimes there are very large farms. The type of equipment we sold, we dealt with large livestock operations. Places where they would be milking in the dairy industry 2,000-3,000 cows on one farm. That's a different way of dairy production than some of the smaller. We have Amish in our area up where I live in central Pennsylvania that still milk 60 to 70 cows, but they are being pushed to the max financially at this point in time.
Okay. So, since we're on the financial side of it, how does the government help subsidize the agriculture industry?
There are some protections available. You can purchase, if you're in crop production, you can can purchase subsidized insurance mostly for crop failure and things. A certain amount, like if you have a bad drought and the yield is reduced a certain percentage, you can get reimbursed for some. And the federal government does subsidize some of the premium for that. There are price supports that are put in place. And I don't know all the ins and outs of the dairy industry. I know there's been a lot of federal control in that business that I'm not sure has been helpful for them. And there have been emergency spending bills passed at times in the past when there's been just economic challenges. Let's put it that way. The bottom line is if you have a populace in a country that starts to get hungry, you got other problems to deal with too. So agriculture and having a reliable food supply is something that we do take for granted in this country. A lot of the world doesn't have that advantage, quite honestly.
So you kind of got to know us through Love's Way Village, and
Yes.
You've been able to come to our area. You got to meet a local farmer. What do you think about the local agriculture industry and just driving through and being here and visiting?
I'm learning more and more about it, and I spent this morning with Mr. Seitz, a local farmer, and he's a beef farmer, cow-calf operator, and apparently there are a good number of those in this area. And that's not something that we have in central Pennsylvania. That's just not.
Really?
That's Virginia and South type thing mostly. I mean, there are some, but not nearly as many as down here. The poultry industry is growing, I think, in this area. No dairy farms, which is different than our area for sure.
Shout out to Dairy Farm, my buddy Michael Stoyer, who is on the West Virginia-Maryland line.
Oh, okay. All right. And I also have learned that there's a fair amount of timber industry in this area, which would make sense. There's a large amount of woodland in the area, and that is part of agriculture also.
So I didn't know that. You just schooled me on something. So timber is part of the agriculture industry.
That's big,
okay.
That's big money.
Well, I know it's big money. I just...
It's considered part of agriculture. Yes,
that's
absolutely. Forestry is definitely lumped with agriculture. It's been enjoyable getting to know this area a little bit. You have a combination of some nice agriculture lands, some great forest lands, great places to hike and climb and paddle on rivers. So come visit. Come visit this area and come to the Glam Site if you want to.
Yeah, there you go. It has been it's been nice living in this area, which it's been my home now since 1988, and getting to see everything that goes in and getting to know some of the farmers quite well. So it's just kind of cool to.
So do you have any favorite farm story that you can think of?
I actually do, and it involves my brother.
Oh, really?
Yeah, going back to Hindman now, Pennsylvania, and our friends had a pool, and in order to swim in the pool, you had to do farm work. Okay. So it was everything from haying to they would take us, which I always thought was cool, to shoot the animals when it was time. And they weren't a massive farm, so it was just small. And so my brother would have been, 3, maybe 4. I don't know, old enough to talk. And so when it was either a pig or a cow, can't remember which one, shot it, and they let us play with it. Of course, I remember pounding the drums on the guts. I thought that was just the coolest thing in the world. But they got an eye out of either the pig or the cow and told Justin that if he planted it, that's how you grew that animal. And he did.
How did that turn out, Justin?
Still waiting. So, a funny story, but you'll never forget those days.
No.
You know?
I mean, I have a lot of fond memories and some tragic ones too. We had a bit of a misfortune one summer night when we did have dairy cows. There was a night thunderstorm, and we had heifers out in the pasture that were under a tree, and we had a lightning strike. And the next morning, we had 17 dead animals laying there under the tree.
So that's something that I thought about. So is that covered by insurance?
Well,
is that a loss?
We had insurance, but you never get full return for a loss like that.
Wow.
So it just was the way it was.
So I just took a sip of my water, and you were talking about milk, energy drinks, bottled water.
Yeah.
Has that harmed the milk industry in any way?
I haven't been a dairy farmer for a long time, but I would say the unequivocal answer to that is yes. And I think, unfortunately, they've lost fluid market share, which is the highest profitable use of their milk, and I don't see that coming back. So consequently, the dairy industry in this country has been very challenged financially over the last decade in many years. And I don't know if I see that changing right away.
And that's really rough because dealing with another very pertinent issue of our time, COVID. One of the very things that can help fight COVID is vitamin D in milk. They found that in COVID, it has a lot. The people that have it have a lot of vitamin D deficiency. So, very important.
They ought to be jumping on that as far as advertising and things. That it might be a little bit of a factor, but yeah, it's unfortunately we don't often in this country consume the things that are the most beneficial for us nutritionally. We consume things that. And there's been a lot of controversy about the high fructose corn syrup and things like that. And I think there's some valid concerns about things like that.
My brother, the producer, who's laughing off stage, knows because he probably went to McDonald's 3 times today to eat healthy. We should add.
No, actually, he's been pretty good today.
Been pretty good today. Well, we live in a very high poultry plant, poultry market here in West Virginia. Pennsylvania, what was it poultry? Was it something else? That
actually, we've had in our area in central Pennsylvania, we've had diversified livestock operations. Years ago, there was mostly dairy farms. 30 years ago, it was mostly dairy farms. And then as the dairies would shrink in numbers, some of those farms would just turn to crop farming then, corn and soybeans primarily, grain farming. We had some poultry, but more so in Lancaster County 30 years ago, which is south of, in the southern part of the state. However, the poultry industry has been rapidly expanding in Pennsylvania over the last 10 years and continues to do so. It seems to be the way that farmers find a way to financially remain viable with the increasing land prices and things is to put up poultry houses. And there apparently is a market for them because they keep building them.
So is that because are we seeing more of a pivot to poultry instead of beef? Or as a demand? Everything, obviously, most of it's supply and demand.
Well, poultry has become the low-cost protein, okay? You can buy poultry per pound of protein for far less than you can any other meat. So the efficiency of the modern poultry farm is just amazing as to what it really costs to raise a bird to market weight. There's a lot of science goes into agriculture, and they have nutritional people that study things all the time because in order to remain financially viable, you have to do things as efficiently as possible. And it's, the years and years ago, I think there was the stereotype that the farmers were kind of not very smart, this and that. Nothing could be further from the truth. You have
to know a lot.
You have to be a financial manager. You have to understand science of what you're doing. You need to understand marketing, because if you produce a product and you don't market it correctly, you can cost yourself a lot of money. Although sometimes in the poultry industry, by and large now, the people that are taking care, the farmers, they don't own the birds. They feed them. They build the building. They're provided the feed and the birds, and they get paid basically to take care of them. And then there can be some bonuses for how efficiently they do that affects the production in the house, for instance. But most poultry operations now, the farmers themselves do not own the birds themselves.
That's interesting.
That's how it works.
Okay, and you were bringing up about having to learn different aspects to stay relevant. Back in October, I believe it was, I was part of Eastern West Virginia Community Technical College, was bringing in students to talk about everything that has to do with farming and agriculture, and trying to get them to go into the field, but tell them about how you have to adapt and different things that are going on now. Is very interesting. And there was maybe 100 kids that showed up, so it was very promising for the future that there's still kids wanting to get into it, because you do need to know it's just not going out and feeding a cow or something. I mean, it's a lot more than that.
Right. And fortunately, there are programs through county extension offices and things where there is education available. There are also many places where in an older generation, even if they don't have family coming up, they will mentor just someone who is younger in the business and for a continuation, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, it is. It's nice. So we hit on just a little bit about inflation, and that was from, buying a piece of equipment in the 70s versus now. What are some of the other ways that inflation is kind of affecting the agricultural industry?
Well, I mean,
besides having to pay higher beef and chicken prices in the
right, inflation has affected all of us. I mean, I went to college at Penn State University in 1981. I graduated.
We are
for we are for $4,400 a year.
Wow.
So do we understand what we're talking about? We've all experienced inflation. What has been amazing in agriculture is the prices of the finished products. Say if we're a crop farmer, the prices that we've been receiving on average for a bushel of corn or soybeans has not risen anywhere near the rate of inflation rise, but the difference has been the efficiency with which the production has increased has still been able to maintain, at least keeping even with the inflation in a sense.
So in a way, is because you're able to do it more efficiently, you can put out more stuff and keep the cost.
Yes, the only drawback with that is from an economic standpoint, sometimes you supply more than you need, and then that depresses the prices. So it's always a game. It's kind of can be very, and then you throw in the other thing that the most farming operations deal with, especially in the crop end, you have the variables that you cannot control. You cannot control how much it rains, and those types of things, and we're kind of at the mercy of our. I'm a Christian man, so I believe in a God who loves us and watches over us, but it rains on the just and the unjust, and it doesn't rain on the just and the unjust. And those are things that you just, if you're going to farm, you accept those variables that you cannot control. It's just a way of life.
Okay. So final word to you, someone thinking about getting into it. Give them your best sales pitch of why you go into agriculture, why you become a farmer.
So when you plant a seed in the spring, either 30,000 seeds per acre for corn or 150,000 seeds per acre for soybeans, if you're a crop farmer.
I never even thought of that. How many?
Oh, that's how many there are. That's how many there are. And you take something that it's not viable, it's dead, and you place it in the ground, and it becomes a living thing that for corn, 90 days later, it's like sometimes 9 feet tall in 90 days. It's amazing. There was nothing ever. One of my favorite times in the corn growing season was always in early July when the corn was a little bit over knee high. and the lightning bugs first started appearing. And at nighttime, they would hover right over that canopy of corn. There's an appreciation that goes beyond dollars and cents. It's a way of life. And there's flexibility in it. It's not the same thing every day. Some people are made to work in a factory 9 to 5. Some people cannot do that. And if you want adventure, challenge, and there is opportunity for economic. You can do okay economically when you're really on top of your game and things. It's a fun way to make a living.
You're definitely not getting the lightning bug experience in the city, are you?
No, you can't even. You know, it's interesting. I was around some Bucknell University students earlier in my time when I was in Central PA, and there was a student that I became friends with who was from the Brooklyn, and he made a remark his sophomore year at college. I never saw stars until I came to Lewisburg to go to school.
Wow.
And being out in nature and things is there's something it's just an opportunity that not that many people have anymore. So production agriculture, we're down to about 4% of the people in the country produce the food. And It used to be, you go back 150 years, it was 80%. So kudos to the farmers.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Dean, for spending some time here on Explore, and we're exploring agriculture. We got a lot of great guests coming up. I'm just working around schedules, so make sure that you go like Explore Grant County, Explore Hardy County. These videos will be posted there exclusively, so check them out. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.